Here we go. You will be muted during this presentation so that we can hear best. And there will be time at the end of the presentation to ask questions. So what I would like you to do is use the chat feature to put your questions in, and then I will try to help ask those questions to Dr. Fowls when we finish, okay? So we are so excited to welcome Brianna Fowls, who is the founder of Oak Hills Medical in Oakland, to our Westside Wellness Wednesday. Brianna's grew up at Westside, so we've just had the honor and privilege of watching her become more of the amazing person that we knew her to be as she was younger and continued on in medicine. So it's just such an honor. And tonight she's going to discuss with us culinary medicine and how food can be used for your well-being. And she will also share some practical tips for integrating healthy foods into our diets, discuss some real-life patient cases to talk about, and talk to us a bit about direct primary care, which is an emerging model that allows physicians to deliver highly personalized, holistic care and develop those close relationships that we all would like to have with our physicians and patients. So Dr. Fowls is a board certified medicine physician, a member of the Humanism Honor Society, and a recipient of the Humanism Scholarship from the Healthcare Foundation for Humanism and Medicine. And she currently serves on their alumni advisory board. But what I really want to say is this is just an amazing human being that cares so much for other human beings and is here to help us on our journey towards wellness. So Brianna, thank you for being here, and I'll turn the program over to you.
Thank you so much, Pat. That was such a sweet introduction. I really appreciate it. And I am so happy and excited to be here tonight. As Pat mentioned, I grew up at Westside. So I went to, Henlopen and with Papa Smurf and confirmation class, the mission trips, Asheville, Mexico with Ken, and Haiti with Mark. And it's so special for me to be presenting here tonight. So thank you so much for having me. All right, give me a moment. I'd like to share my screen. All right. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Perfect.
Perfect. So like Pat said, I'm here to talk about direct primary care as well as culinary medicine and give you guys some tips that hopefully you can use in your own life. So I would like to start off. Why is that not moving forwards? There we go. I'd like to start off with telling you a little bit more about myself and my background before I start telling you about what I'm doing. So I'm a family medicine physician, and I recently opened a direct primary care practice in the community. And I became a doctor. I'm here today where I am, as cliche as it sounds, because I really care about people. I like working with people and for people. That's always been my drive since I was little. Probably many of you who are in this, room tonight can relate to the fact that volunteering, working with people, trying to get them to, to feel better, do better in different ways, and share your talents with them brings so much joy and fulfillment to my own life. So I'm sure many of you here can relate to that. I was drawn into medicine because of that humanism aspect. When I was thinking about career choices, I thought, oh, that's great if I could help people, who are sick feel better and stay healthy and be well, because that's so important in life. So I was very honored when I got into medical school. I went to New Jersey Med School and got to be part of the Humanism in Medicine program, which I still am involved with today, like Pat said, on the advisory board. And so during my time in med school, I not only focused on all the, rigorous academics of learning, all the anatomy and the body and the treatments for diseases, but also had, a strong core foundation that drew me back to why did I get into medicine? That human aspect of it, treating patients with care, compassion, empathy, being a human being to another human being. It was pretty fitting that I went into family medicine. That's my specialty of choice. I love the fact that I get to know patients over a long period of time, that I get to know their family and take care of their whole family. I get so excited when I get to see the kids and the parents and the grandparents. Like, that's just really cool. After med school, I did my residency at Somerset Medical Center, that then, during my time there, transitioned to Robert Wood Johnson. And that was in Hillsborough. That's 3 years. And residency is sort of like an apprenticeship almost, where you're a doctor, but you're doing extra learning on top. After that, I joined a nearby practice in Hillsborough. It was owned by a few other physicians. And although it was a very busy outpatient office, I still was able to get to know and care for my patients, and that was valued. Two things happened during my last year there. The small practice got bought out by a hospital system, which is happening all over the place. And then also within a couple months of that, COVID hit. So it was two very big, hard transitions on the office at the same time. During the start of the pandemic, I was happy that I could be a helper, that I could, that I had a skill and a knowledge and could go into the respiratory centers and the tent and, help acutely with COVID. It was really when things started getting back to the office that some things got to me and affected me a lot. It was clear that the hospital's value system and goals and objectives, which really reflects the American healthcare system at large, had kind of different objectives than me, and different views on how patients should be treated. So there were incentives on, after all, it's a business. So there were incentives on how many patients you could see and to see them very quickly. And it led to very impersonal care. A lot was dictated by insurance companies that don't really provide financial benefit for physicians to spend a long time talking about diet and exercise and lifestyle choices, which the longer that I'm a physician, the more I realize are so important to the foundation of health, as well as really important for underlying causes and treatment for so many diseases that we see day in, day out as a doctor. So I personally made the very hard decision that I was going to leave the traditional practice. And in fact, I almost nearly left medicine altogether because I was so burned out and sad about the current healthcare system. And ultimately, once I had more time to kind of think and reflect, I decided that I wanted to practice in a different way. I love the medicine side. I love the people part. Being a doctor is really fun and exciting to me. And I just didn't like doing it in the way the system was set up. So for me, my goals were to create something that's holistic, that's convenient for patient, and that's really transparent with cost. So that leads me to, what is direct primary care? So direct primary care is this alternate business model for primary care practices. And basically it's very reactionary to the current healthcare system in America. And it's basically patients join the practice as a member, and in exchange, they get improved access to their doctor. So it's almost like a gym membership where you join the practice just like you would join a gym. And then after that, you pay a monthly fee or a monthly rate, and you get all the care, all the access that you need. So just like you go to a gym once in a month or every single day, you know the cost, the gym knows the cost. It's very simple and straightforward. When I first read about that, I was like, oh, another monthly membership thing. That's terrible. But the more that I read about what is the meaning and the implications of what that brings to the table, the more excited I got about it. And the reason why, very simple. If I, as a doctor, keep you as my patient healthier, you're going to need me less and you're going to be healthier. And that's a win for both of us. And it's really simple, but that's huge. So that's kind of in contrast to the current healthcare system where payments are made for each visit and every procedure that's done. So it's kind of this perverse incentive that if patients are sicker or have more visits or come in more, that there's actually more money being made. On the patient side of things, it makes patients wait until they're really, really, really sick before they come in to see the doctor, because you don't know what it's going to cost, and it's going to be expensive, and you don't want to pay for something that's just a little thing or just a preventive thing. You know, you want to only go when you're really sick. So between that kind of difference, as well as, you know, by being a super small practice rather than a big hospital system, I'm able to cut out a lot of the middlemen, like the billing department, the insurance companies, the hospital CEO, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm actually able to make my care not only better care, but more affordable. So that's what excited me about the model. And so with that, I created the practice called Oak Hills Medical. I just opened in January, so it's still, you know, kind of brand new, but it allows me, and kind of the structure allows me to take care of, to kind of take the way that I feel like is right to practice medicine and be able to apply that in practice. So, you know, in terms of holistic approach, I mean that in two different ways. The first way with a holistic approach is I get to know my patients as people, not just as a number. And that to me is really important. That's why I went into medicine. And I do that by keeping a really small panel size. Most family med physicians at big, busy practices have 2,000 to 3,000 patients in their panel. I'm going to cap at about 100, maybe less, because I'm also a mom of 2 little kids. So I also want to, you know, make sure that my time, I'm able to give everybody enough time. When I bring on a new patient, I block out at least an hour, sometimes more, if I know that they have other problems, so that I can actually get to know them and go through all their stuff really well. And I can have much more frequent contact with my patients, which I kind of love. You know, I have a couple people who are dealing with acute things right now or ongoing issues right now, and I get to email them weekly, and that's great. I kind of love those updates and reports and just checking in. So that is kind of how I do the holistic part. The other thing that I mean by holistic is I get to integrate those lifestyle medicines with, you know, the traditional practice. So, you know, I'm going to go through in a few minutes, I'm going to go through how I integrate culinary medicine, because that's something I'm really passionate about. And so how I can integrate that in to just my patients' regular care. In terms of convenience, this is a bit reactionary. Going to the doctor is not convenient at all for patients. Traditional practice, you have to go in person to the office for almost everything. And the reason why is because that's how insurance reimburses. They don't reimburse for the phone call, they only reimburse for the in-person visit. So you go in, you sit forever in the waiting room, possibly around other sick people. And then you finally, after hours of waiting, get to spend 5 minutes with your doc who's hurried and runs through the room. And then you get billed, months later. And if later on something comes up or changes, or you have a question and you try to get in touch with your doctor, it can be really frustrating. You go through all these different phone chains and maybe get a doc who, doesn't know you calling you back. So for me, what I'm doing is I literally am doing home visits, just like back in the day. And that way, for your physical or whenever you need to be seen, I come to you. I have a big black bag with all my doctor tools that you'd usually see in a physician's office. And I go to my patient's house and I turn their living room into, the exam room. Also, not everything has to be an in-person visit. So a lot of things can be done through, a quick text or an email or a video call. So for example, if, my patient touches poison ivy and they get a rash, they can just text me a picture of the rash and be like, touch poison ivy. And I can be like, okay, here's what we need to do. And that's really quick. And they don't need to, waste a whole day coming into the office. So also, because I'm the sole person in the practice, it's whenever you call, you don't go through phone chains, you just get a hold of me, which I think also leads for better care. In terms of the transparent cost structure, that's also, kind of reactionary to the current healthcare systems. And like I said, I'm modeling this after a direct primary care practice. So sort of like a gym membership, there's that initial enrollment fee, then the monthly cost, and it covers nearly everything that I do. That being said, there's certain things that I personally don't do. So, if you needed a specialist, or God forbid, I'm trying to keep you out of the hospital, but if you needed to go to the hospital, that's when you would use your insurance. And, for something like labs, I would order the labs, but then if you needed to go to a lab department, then that would also either be through insurance, or someplace, if you have a high deductible plan, some places it's actually cheaper to pay out of pocket. So it's sort of, what works for you when you go to LabCorp, Quest, or wherever you go. So that's sort of how that works and what I'm doing. As you can probably tell from how I'm speaking and what I'm talking about, for me, I believe that the best medicine is prevention. And for me, it's important when I see somebody and treat something to not only treat the acute problem and the acute symptoms that they're having, but also focus and look at what's the underlying causes. What's making them feel that way? What's making them sick? So Hippocrates said it well, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. All right. So what is this culinary medicine thing? So this is something that I'm really passionate about. And what it is it's kind of an emerging field or specialty in medicine. And healthcare professionals, including doctors, can get extra training and extra knowledge and courses on how to use food as medicine. So it incorporates both the basic nutritional information, like how much protein and sugars and, vitamins and minerals do you need, but it goes beyond that. It also is looking at food as treatments for medication. So if somebody has a certain disease or diseases, what foods should they be eating to, one, not worsen those things, and two, improve them. It also takes a very practical approach. And I've done a bunch of classes where chefs taught me, the culinary skills and how to cook and how do you cut vegetables and how do you, make whole grains, and what are some of the very practical tips that then I can bring back and teach my patients if they don't know those things. If I, as your doctor, say, eat more fruits and vegetables, and you have no clue how to cook them or cut them, we're not getting very far. So to actually be able to say, okay, let's do that, is really important for making actual change. And then, also looking at cooking and making food with some real life restraints. There's financial restraints, there's time restraints, there's different things that sort of can be roadblocks or stumbling blocks for a lot of people in order to make a healthy diet, because we're all busy. All right. So next, I'm going to go into a few case examples. And for privacy purposes, I changed a few details. So the names are different, the ages are plus or minus a few years, but they're based on real patients and the real conditions that they have. So I'll start with John. And he is a 50-year-old man who actually worked in the food industry. And he ate a pretty typical standard American diet. The name for it is SAD, the SAD diet, and it's pretty sad. I'll go into it in a minute. So he was eating the standard American diet, and he was a patient of mine in my prior practice. So I saw him for about 4 years. And over that time, I'd touch on it and be like, hey, how about some diet? Some exercise would help. And he was like, I'm really busy. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm not there. It's not fitting into my life. So over those years, I saw his diseases getting slowly worse and medications needing to be added and upped and increased, and him just getting progressively sicker, So, kind of prior to him making some big changes, for his hypertension, which is high blood pressure, he was on 3 medications daily to control it. He had high cholesterol, and he was on a statin medication, and that helps lower cholesterol. He had to be on a high dose. For his diabetes, he was on a common medication that helps bring down your sugar level. For his anxiety and depression, he was also on a daily medication there. So I wanted to clarify, when I say the word diet, what do I mean by that? So what I mean is a style or a way of eating. And people have different diets, and as well as we choose different foods for different purposes or reasons. So there's a lot of different types of diets out there. We always think of, when we hear the word diet, just used in our regular conversation, we always think of the weight loss diets. So, there's the Weight Watchers, the South Beach, the, you name it, there's a ton, and they're just trying to lower your weight, and that's their goal. There's diets that are based on the location, such as the Mediterranean diet. You think of more cuisines, or, Japanese cuisine, or the American diet. There's also people eat certain ways based on religion, like think of kosher or halal. And those are influenced by, your religious beliefs. There's also, I put exclusionary, but what I mean by that is, there's vegans who don't eat any meat or dairy. There's vegetarians who don't eat meat, but do eat dairy. There's whole food plant-based, which I'll get into more in a minute. There's pescatarians who just eat fish but not other meats. There's gluten-free, there's keto, and there's all sorts of diets that say, okay, eat this group, not that group, for various reasons. There's also diets that are very specific for certain diseases. So, for example, the DASH diet, DASH, stands for dietary approach to stop hypertension. So that was made by scientists and tried to target hypertension or high blood pressure. And then, of course, for people with like a PEG tube or some metabolic disorder like PKU, they're going to be on a very specific, almost like medical formula as their diet. So the SAD diet, that standard American diet that I was talking about, what that is it's kind of, we call it the American diet, but really it's kind of becoming more widespread around the world. It's really high in ultra processed foods. And that means kind of the best way to think about ultra processed is through example. You have the whole food, which is like corn on the cob. You start to process it, you get cornmeal and maybe make a simple cornbread. You super ultra process it and you're going to end up with like Doritos. So the SAD diet is high in those ultra processed foods. There's also a lot of sugars, fat, sodium. Those are the main things that enhance flavor. There's especially a lot of refined sugar, white flour. You see that kind of all over. The processing processes that they go through to get that sugar and that flour are a lot, and they strip away a lot of the nutrients from the foods. There's also really high levels of meat, especially red processed meat. You know, you think of American cuisine, you think of the burgers and dogs on the grill, in the white bread buns, and that's typical. The food is usually very calorie dense, which means if I eat one bite of a, hot dog with its bun, that's going to be a lot of calories for one bite. If I eat that same size bite of a carrot, there's going to be very few calories. So that's, not calorie dense. So the SAD diet is sadly making us sick. So what would I recommend to John or other people, who are in his situation? There's been tons of studies done, and different diets, whether it's the Mediterranean diet or anti-inflammatory diet, or many diets that tend to work very well for this sort of health issue. The common parts of them are they have a high level of whole foods, meaning not processed. You get away from that ultra processing, you get back to the corn on the cob, and a lot of plants. So, you think of the fruits and vegetables, but also the legumes, the whole grains, the nuts, and the seeds. So diets that incorporate a lot of those things in an unprocessed way are very healthful for many conditions, including diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, anxiety, depression, all those things that he was struggling with. Some people, when they follow a whole food plant-based diet, are completely exclude that second list of foods. And I'd say the majority of people would do predominantly whole food plant-based. So they say, I'm going to do plant forwards. And that's where I fall. So diets that are high in whole food plant-based have been associated with a lot of really amazing health outcomes. When you look at, similar time periods, say a 10-year study of people eating a standard American diet versus, one of those diets that's high in whole food plant-based, There's decreased all-cause mortality. So less people die, or they live longer. There's also weight loss, improved cholesterol, depending how strict and with other things, there's actually been studies that have shown reversal of cardiovascular disease. There is decreased risk of many cancers, including colon and prostate and breast cancer, decreased risk of diabetes. And if you do have diabetes, improved glycemic control, so improved sugar control. There's a lot of reasons. I think I'm going to show you how nerdy I am. There's lots of really cool reasons why this works and why this is, that range from the improved gut microbiome. So the little bugs that are in your GI system are a lot healthier with all that fiber and all those plants. You get improved glycemic control, which then alters a lot of other chemical processes in your body. The calorie density is a lot lower with these foods, so you tend to be less overweight, as well as it signals, satiety signals, because your stomach actually gets full. There's anti-inflammatory reasons, antioxidant. I could give a whole lecture on just the different reasons of why it is and kind of the pathophysiology behind it. But the main thing and what I'm going to focus on here is, if I had to point him, pointing him in a direction, this is the direction that I'm going to suggest that he take. So when a lot of people initially hear that, they're like, wow, it sounds like you're going to eat like a rabbit. That sounds really boring. I don't want to eat only carrots all day. So I'm including a recipe, and this is one of my favorite recipes. It's mango salsa. And afterwards, I can send Pat the recipes, and she can send them out, or she could give me the email list, and I can send you guys the recipes that I'm presenting here today. But what I love about this salsa recipe is it's whole food, plant-based, and it is absolutely packed with fruits and vegetables and loaded with flavors. And by flavoring your foods with herbs and spices and citrus and garlic and onion and vinegar and peppers and things like that, instead of the traditional standard American salt, fat, sugar, it's going to lead to a lot better health outcomes. And be really, really tasty, which I'm a foodie, so that's great. All right, so back to John. It was actually for him during the COVID pandemic that he decided was the right time to make giant lifestyle shifts. So he adopted a predominantly whole food plant-based diet, which is amazing. And because he worked in the food industry, he was actually a chef, and he was like really loving all the new recipes that he was making. And he was telling me about some of them, and they sounded delicious. He also started biking with one of his sons. And so he started getting more physically active as well, which was really cool that he included the family into his journey. His health substantially improved, both physically and mentally, over about a 6-month time period with those changes. He went from the 3 antihypertensive medications, the 3 medicines for the blood pressure, and by the end, he was down to 1. For his cholesterol, his numbers kept dropping, and he went from a high dose statin to only needing a really low dose. For the diabetes, he got off medication completely, and actually for him, the depression and anxiety improved greatly as well, and he also was able to stop his medication. He felt so good with these changes that he's motivated to continue them long-term and make them just part of his normal routine. In terms of a long-term trajectory, he's drastically altered his life course. Even with all the medications, controlling him the best that we could medically previously, the food has done a better job, and long-term, he's at much lower risk for heart attack, stroke, cancer, dementia, so many different things. He's now changed his trajectory and is going to do better long-term. So that was really happy and exciting that he did great with those changes. All right. So my next patient, I'm going to call him Tim, and he is a really sweet but very active 5-year-old boy, and he has the diagnosis of ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So at the start, when I initially saw him, he was not on any medications, and during COVID, he started school, virtual kindergarten. And my daughter is the same age and also did virtual kindergarten that year. And that is really hard for a kid who doesn't have ADHD. For him, it was especially difficult for both him and his family. He struggled. I think their breaking point was when he finally just melted down through his computer and cried to his mom and said, I don't understand why all the kids can do what I'm unable to do. Like, I can't do what they're all doing. So I want to take this time to talk about food that's good for your brain. And this is kind of inclusive. It's, I'm talking about the case about ADHD, but this is also foods that are good for anxiety, depression, dementia, for focus and attention, even without the diagnosis of ADHD. So antioxidants are really good for the brain. The brain is very susceptible to something called oxidative stress, and the antioxidants that are found in a lot of plant food, especially berries, nuts are really high. They have a lot of antioxidants that sort of counter react with those, the oxidative stress. And so those foods can help improve your memory. They can slow dementia. They can improve reasoning scores when you have high levels of antioxidants. In terms of fats, it's important to choose your fats selectively. There's two kinds of fats, the good kind, and I'll put it in quotations, or two kinds of fats that our bodies need. They're called essential. Our bodies cannot make them. We need to get them through things we eat. So the quote, good kind is omega-3. And that's a kind, and it has a lot of roles in terms of your cognitive development, neuroplasticity. It has a ton of roles in the health of your brain and your nervous system. In contrast, the quote, bad fat is omega-6. Omega-6 is pro-inflammatory. Now, when we get a cut or a scrape or an injury, we need inflammation to help our bodies heal. But if you have a chronic low level of inflammation, then it actually can lead to a lot of chronic diseases, such as, some types of arthritis, autoimmune diseases. It can worsen diabetes, hypertension, a bunch of those different things. So ideally, the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6, the good versus the bad, is 1.6 to 1. The standard American diet is totally the opposite, that is usually like 1 to 14 or 1 to 25, depending which study you look at. So by choosing our fats and choosing, things that are rich in omega-3s, we're going to help shift that balance back towards the omega-3. So, by replacing the red meats with, something like a salmon or a fish, and adding in more flaxseed, chia seeds, walnuts, olive oil to replace other fats and proteins, that's going to help switch that balance and be better for our mental health. Also, and this is fairly specific for ADHD, but artificial food colorings, as well as a lot of the preservatives they're often found with, can be pretty tough on the brain. So by choosing snacks and foods and avoiding the artificial food colorings, it helps improve your attention and focus and memory, whether or not you have a diagnosis of ADHD. Similar to the fats, we have to choose our carbohydrates wisely. So instead of, and the reason why is because these simple carbohydrates like the candies, the sugars, the sweets, as well as the processed white flour, processed white rice, those interfere with our insulin level and overall inflammation level. And so instead, if you choose to sweeten your foods with fruits and you choose to for your grains, eat whole grains like brown or wild rice or oatmeal or quinoa or farro, that's going to help improve your brain health, improve your sugar level, and therefore your brain health. All right. Even though it's not necessarily the most kid-friendly recipe, this is one of my favorite recipes. It's a kale salad. It's really good in the fall and winter time. It is bright and colorful with the butternut squash and the pomegranate that's in it without any artificial food colors. It also is loaded with antioxidants with everything that's in it. It's high in omega-3s, especially with the walnuts in it. And you have more complex carbohydrates, especially the quinoa, as well as that also has additional protein. All right, so what happened with Tim? Tim really needed a multi-pronged approach. For him, diet was definitely a big part of his treatment plan. And for him, similar to John, it was a whole family shift. I found that a lot of times when one person shifts their diet, the whole family shifts their diet. He also started on medication, and he continues to work with a team to get extra assistance at school. He is night and day a different kid. He is thriving. He is so happy. He is proud of himself. He is able to keep up and do what the other kids are doing. He is doing well in school. He's making friends. It's amazing to see him doing so great. All right, so third person, and I see that I have to rush with time. Third person is Kate. And she's a 30-year-old female. She's a stay-at-home mom. She has a young child at home. And she has being a mom, I can totally relate. And in the morning, she's exhausted. She needs a couple cups of coffee. And then in the evening, after her kids are asleep, she has a glass or two of wine most evenings to try to relax. She also was eating a lot of the foods that her kids like. So she'd have a lot of pizza, pasta with tomato sauce, tacos, some of those quote kid-friendly meals. And she had really classic symptoms of GERD, which is called gastroesophageal reflux disease. So she had heartburn, which is burning pain in your chest after eating. It worsened when she'd lay down. She had sometimes nausea, some belching, a bitter taste in her mouth, pain in her upper stomach area. And she was kind of miserable with the foods that she was eating and drinking. So what are her treatment options? What can she do? So there are medications. Oh no, the image isn't showing. All right, so first I wanted to talk about, and I guess I'll just use my hands, but I wanted to do a quick anatomy lesson first. So you have your, from your mouth, food goes from your mouth down the esophagus and into your stomach. where the esophagus and the stomach connect, there's something called the lower esophageal sphincter. And what that is, or is supposed to be, is like a one-way door that lets food down, but doesn't let acid up. With GERD, what happens is some of that acid goes the wrong way. And instead of staying in your stomach, it goes up through that door into the esophagus and causes pain because the stomach has the lining to protect it from the acid, but the esophagus doesn't. So, all right. So what are her treatment options? So there's medications. There's kind of two types of medications. There's antacids, which actually try to neutralize the stomach acid, and that's like calcium carbonate, famotidine. There's a bunch of them. And there's also proton pump inhibitors, and what they're trying to do is to decrease how much acid is released into the stomach, and that's like omeprazole, pantoprazole. Other than medications, there's also lifestyle changes. So the thought, kind of the concept behind the lifestyle, like stay upright after a meal, tilt the head of the bed up, is basically you're having gravity on your side, help keep the stomach acid down rather than coming up into the esophagus. Foods play a really big part of GERD symptoms. So there's lists of foods to avoid, and there's different reasons why those different foods can trigger GERD. So things like citrus and tomatoes, they increase the acidity level of the stomach, make it more acidic, and so more likely to have GERD or to worsen the GERD that you have. So for her, she was eating a lot of tomato-based products, both in the sauce of the pizza, the sauce on the pasta, as well as, in the tacos. Coffee and other caffeinated beverages, as well as sometimes even uncaffeinated coffee, how they work is they actually cause relaxing of that lower esophageal sphincter. So it's sort of like that door that's supposed to be closed opens a little bit when you have caffeine. And so it allows that acid up into the esophagus. So by eliminating, coffee and caffeinated drinks, that's going to lessen that from happening. Same thing happens with a certain chemical in chocolate. It also relaxes that lower esophageal sphincter. Mint, garlic, and onion, similar thing, relaxes the sphincter. Interestingly, garlic and onion usually are a little better tolerated with GERD when you cook them first. So if, someone with GERD might be able to get away with and not have symptoms with roasted garlic, whereas fresh garlic might trigger them. Carbonated beverages trigger things in that they have a lot of gas with them. So they actually bloat your stomach and cause gas and some acid to come up out of the sphincter. And then fatty, spicy, fried foods, they actually, one, relax that sphincter and open that sphincter, but also they slow down digestion. They take a long time for your body to digest. So it increases the time or the likelihood that you'd get GERD. All right. For long-term things that can help with GERD, increased amount of fiber is actually helpful. There's been a couple of studies done recently. One showed that people who just took fiber supplements with GERD and improved their symptoms. Another one had people actually eat plant-based foods and that improved their symptoms. The reason why they theorize that is because all the fiber in your food improves the gut microbiome. You always think of it in your intestines that you have lots of bacteria helping you digest things and helping the movement of your intestines, but you also have some in your esophagus and your stomach. And this can, what you eat and the amount of fiber can change that gut flora. So long-term, to add in more fiber. All right, So the recipe here, that I'd recommend is another one of my favorite, and it's overnight oats. Basically, you take the old-fashioned rolled oats and you add equal part, I do an almond milk. You can add in whatever other things you want, and you can make a really healthy, full of fiber meal. You can throw in lots of fruits and add antioxidants. You can throw in some nuts and add those omega-3s. And you can vary it a lot. I put in a lot of seasonal fruit, and that's going to be a great thing, for patients with GERD, or really any of those patients could benefit from something like that, as well as it's quick and easy. So for someone with a busy schedule, you make a few of these one night, pop them in the fridge, and you can just open them up and eat them on the run in the morning. All right, so what happened to Kate? So she decided to make some lifestyle changes rather than starting medications, and she did really well with them. For her, she was able to avoid and to make some big changes in her diet and avoid and limit some of the food that triggered her GERD. She decreased the amount of coffee she drank and just limited to 1 glass instead of multiple big ones. And she cut out the wine in the evening. And instead she actually started yoga at nighttime, which is great and has multiple other, positive benefits. And she stopped eating when she put the kids to bed. And so it was a couple hours before she herself went to bed. She increased her fiber in her diet. And similar to my other patients, that also shifted and changed the diet that her family was eating, which I think is so important. And her GERD resolved. She doesn't have it anymore. And similar to my other patients, it also changes her long-term trajectory. So instead of looking at the complications that can come from years and years of chronic GERD, if this wasn't addressed, such as the ulcers or the Barrett's or even cancer, she's not going to deal with any of those things 20, 30 years down the road from now, which is wonderful. All right. So in briefest of summaries, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And now in the last couple minutes remaining, I'll open things up to questions. So.
Oh, Brianna, this is so wonderful and so helpful. People are asking for recipes. So I think one of the ways could be to address, and you could send Dr. Brianna Fowls an email and she can send them to you, or you can contact Liz and I, and we will make sure that we get that information to you.
Yeah.
A question came up, can you recommend some good cookbooks?
So I actually like cooking blogs because I am always on my phone. So I love Cookie and Kate is one of my favorites. She does a lot of vegetarian things. The Smitten Kitchen is another one who just does a lot of good, solid, whole food recipes. She's not always plant-based, but her stuff is very tasty. Forks Over Knives it was actually a documentary, but then they've kind of expanded it a ton, and they do really good and wide breadth of whole food plant-based recipes with also low or no oil, which is important for many, many diseases. So those are some of my top go-tos. But yeah, there's a lot. Also, if you're someone who really likes to follow recipes, just Googling healthy version of, something is going to bring up a healthier version. I know I like to make things up a lot as I'm cooking and be like, oh, what's seasonal? How much of this do I have? And kind of throw it together. My mother-in-law loves to follow the recipe to a T. So if you're a follow the recipe to a T person, you can even, if you're looking for, an apple cake or, something like that, do healthy version of. So.
Wonderful, wonderful. You mentioned something about, I'm not sure if I heard it correctly, something about plant forward.
Yeah. So what I mean by that is just lots Lots of plants. So for example, the Mediterranean diet, it does include fish and oil and wine in it. But if you look at the core of the Mediterranean diet, you'll see a lot of plant food. So a lot of whole fruits and vegetables and nuts and legumes and beans. And so even though it does include some of the other stuff, one term for that is it's very plant forward or plant heavy in what you're actually eating.
Okay, great. Well, we're getting a lot of thank yous. Great presentation. We have time maybe for one more question before we have to leave.
And
Very
Pat,
inspiring. Go ahead.
I'll also put this out there that I just started last month doing like a monthly newsletter, and I'm trying to include a recipe in each month. So if anybody is interested in getting that, they can email me or touch base with you, and you can pass along their info to me, and I'll include them in that.
Okay, that's wonderful. Oh, here's a question. This is an interesting one. So there's a lot of the fake meats, like, so what might your opinion be of the Beyond Burger? Something like that.
So I'm going to answer this from a couple different viewpoints. From
Okay.
an environmental standpoint, it is awesome because it has such a smaller environmental impact to do one of those like Impossible burgers than it does to raise the cows and the farm, the farming that's needed to have the feed for the cows and the methane. So from an environmental standpoint, absolutely. From a health standpoint, I'm not sure. There's not the long-term data, but my guess, if I had to guess, I would be leery of it. The reason why is because it's so ultra processed that I would be afraid that it has a lot of those negative consequences for long-term health that a lot of the other ultra processed foods have.
Got it.
Good question.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay, well, I actually think we're out of time. Wait, there's one more. Let me see if I can get to it here. More thank yous. You're getting so many thank yous.
Thank you all for coming. This has been fun. I'm glad I could share.
I really am so grateful for really the appetizer that you've given us tonight to begin another way to look at our food, to look at how we can deal with our health, that there is some really good information and ways to take care of ourselves. And so wonderful to know that physicians out there like you are actually interested in making us and keeping us well, instead of just taking care of us when we're sick. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Your Brianna's information is up there. And if you need more information, please feel free to contact us. We do have your list from tonight, so we could just send that out to everyone. And please, if you don't want it, you don't have to use it, but we will make sure that you do have that. So thank you again for joining us for Wellness Wednesday. This is our last Zoom Wellness Wednesday. Next week, we have a concert, which should be really quite spectacular. That will be live and live streamed. So we welcome you to that as well. And as we like to say, as we are leaving the evening, again, thank you, Dr. Fowls, and be well. Take care.
Thanks so much, Pat. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.